Howdy, everybody.
Good
How's it
evening.
going? Welcome to the Boston Office 365 user group. We're sorry for the late start. We had a couple little technical challenges here, but it should be good to go now. So on screen, you'll see that we have a bunch of capabilities for accessing all of the members here. Feel free to follow us. If you guys are ever interested in checking out what Microsoft has been up to or the latest updates that they're doing, then you can follow our Twitter account. Our Twitter account actually automatically follows a bunch of Microsoft products, teams, and retweets out any of the stuff that they do. So really good source of info there. We also have our YouTube channel, which now has over 2 years of content up there. So there's lots and lots of good stuff up there. So feel free to check that out. All right. So for the group, we have Dimitri at the back with Turn Digital, one of our founding members. My name is Mike Dixon with Wellington Street Consulting, and we now have Mr. David Pileggi of Staples joining us.
I would tell you as well. Thanks for using that.
You're welcome.
That's his office at Staples.
Right.
So last month, we actually did a case study that was a mock consultation between talking about a project of migrating Skype to Teams that was actually hosted by myself and David Pileggi. There were lots of technical issues with those that were trying to stream that, so I do apologize for that. It was a learning experience, and that is now, in spite of that, if you guys check it out, it is now available on our YouTube channel. So my apologies, and we know what not to do next time. So thanks. So on to our updates. So we also go through updates for things, what's happened in the last 30 days that Microsoft has announced. Just to give you guys a quick summary, Microsoft actually releases over 200 updates per month into Office 365 and the various components thereof. So this is not at all an inclusive list, just like. It's interesting, you know, Microsoft is now doing this all-in-one app. I think it's interesting. It's calling it all-in-one, but it's also yet another app. So there's a lot there. They also recently announced 2 new security systems that are being rolled out, called Safe Documents and Application Guard. Safe Documents is basically an enhancement to the protected view option that used to exist there. It's it was unclear to me whether or not this means that protected view is going away or not. I believe it is, and it's going to be replaced by this. And the idea is this has the capabilities of taking the decision of whether or not you want to trust this document source out of the user's hands, and that can be controlled by administrators instead. That's at least one tiny component of it. There's a link down here where you guys can read up on their full announcements. There were lots of very technical components in there, and I honestly only had time to kind of skim through it, so I didn't catch all of it. So link at the bottom here to catch up on that. And basically, Application Guard sounds like it's a new way to sandbox applications. It's launching things in what they're calling a micro VM. So things similar to like Hyper-V and Hyper-App sort of capabilities. So kind of doing the same thing on the application layer that we're doing at the document layer with the other component. All right. Also, for Outlook Online, tasks is being replaced by to-do. This is, I did a little bit of digging to look to see if there were any announcements. I saw zero mention of this happening or ever coming down to the Outlook application for the desktop. I couldn't find any reference to whether or not that would happen, but it is being rolled out right now for Outlook Online. So keep an eye out for that. And also in the world of Outlook, Outlook Mobile can now be used for managing mailboxes that people are delegates of. So for all of the executive admins of the world, this is going to be an absolute godsend, because they can basically accept or book meetings on behalf of their boss or whoever they're delegating while on the road.
Or an item they wish they never thought of.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It does. It is one of those things that removes the
Protection of work from
protection. Yeah. So, other than that, we actually wanted to put a. Sorry, our slides are a little out of order here. We actually have a sponsor for this session for Backupify, and we're actually going to hear from them for about the next 10 to 15 minutes. All right. While they're up here and getting set up, come on up, guys. Anybody have any questions about any of the updates that we announced, or any other updates that you guys saw and were surprised by, or anything like that? Anyone?
I will talk about one during the early part of my presentation.
Looks like it is.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
All right. So now that I've eaten up a whole bunch of time talking about how to get my microphone working, we're going to run through this really quick. First of all, I just want to start off with two questions here. Who in this room is working with an O365 environment or tenant at this moment in time? All right, I see some hands not up. Am I in the wrong user group right now? All right, just checking. More importantly, with those tenants, whether they're your own or a client or someone else, how many of those are being backed up? That's, last time I was here, that's more than we got last time, so I will take that as a win. Cool. So if you haven't guessed already, Backupify focuses on backup. I did not create the name. That's where it is. Essentially, what I like to touch on here really quickly is what's often referred to as the shared responsibility model. I am not here to bash Microsoft. A lot of people do that. Microsoft is awesome. I love their product, for better or worse sometimes. However, they're not perfect. No one is, right? And at the end of the day, their contracts are structured around the shared responsibility model. Their responsibility is uptime and availability. Can you access your data? Right? They accomplish this through replicating your data across multiple data centers. Right? This is all common knowledge. Most people know this. However, the integrity of the data is your responsibility, whether it's your end customer, your client. If you work at a business like Staples back there, I know you moved over to the dark side, David. Essentially, that really comes to be your issue. Whether it's a user deleting something, whether it's an encryption event via ransomware riding up the client or files on demand, whatever you want to call it, or just something went wrong. Sometimes we'll never really know what happened. Right? Ultimately, that data integrity is your responsibility. And if you look at your user agreements with Microsoft, they limit their liability in this regard for this exact reason, because they want it to be your responsibility. Now, does that mean Microsoft does nothing to help you? Absolutely not. You've got recycling bins, you've got second stage recycling bins, you've got retention periods. There's lots of stuff here. But at the end of the day, none of it's foolproof. And that's really where Backupify comes into play. And ultimately, that's sort of what I want to talk about today. So really quickly, just to establish credibility that I'm not some random person off the street. Believe me or not, this has been around for a while. So we started back in 2008, launched our first products in 2009. Back then, I don't know if any of you were using O365. It was not necessarily enterprise ready, so we focused on the G Suite side of things. But we then moved over to O365. Really been where we've been, right? It's the fastest growing platform pretty much out of anything. Today, over 35,000 customers have chosen Backupify. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide. That's 2,000 customers, right? But I do like to get across on this slide those that we do operate anywhere from 50 users and a couple of gigs of data, all the way up to customers who have petabytes of data stored, tens of thousands of users. So regardless of the workload, we are capable of handling all of that. Couple of items on features. We do backup, Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. We do backup today, unlimited storage, and indefinite retention. Honestly, if you guys have looked at backup solutions out there, this is a little bit unique. Some people do this, but a lot of them are asking you to manage your own storage. And I'll talk about sort of things that differentiate things that ultimately makes it super simple. Right? No one wants to deal with backup. I know I'm weird. I like this stuff. I think it's really interesting. But for most of you, you want to be in PowerShell running actual interesting stuff in O365. That's probably way over my head. Last couple of things I want to touch on before I actually show you what this platform looks like. Just some security features. Anytime we're talking about backing up data, security is important, right? O365 has quickly established itself as probably the most secure productivity platform, at least that's being widely used today, right? So what good is it if the backup solution you use isn't secure, right? So we use our own purpose-built cloud. I won't spend a lot of time on that right now, but if you guys are interested, I can talk about that for hours after the presentation. We are SOC 2 Type 2 certified, both on the infrastructure level for our data centers, as well as at the application layer, right? So it's not just the infrastructure that's secure, the software is too. This is, again, a pretty big differentiator for us and something that I always like to focus on. Additionally, we do encrypt the data in transit as well as at rest. So all of these key important items, probably stuff that you would expect to see anyways, but shockingly, that's not what everyone in the market does. So from here, and of course the Teams is blocking my preview, there we go. We're going to go ahead and flip over to the platform itself. And of course, this is the moment that doesn't do exactly what I want. Here we go. Why is it still doing that? Oh, skip it. There we go. Oh, I know what it was doing. That was my fault. There we go. Voila. And this should only take a few seconds. We're going to do something really simple today. Someone lost an email. You okay? Oh, yeah, move that over. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. So really quickly, just recovering an email, I want to show you how simple this is, right? Everyone's used a recycling bin. Worse yet, we've all used litigation hold to recover content. Someone in marketing deletes a couple of emails and goes, I need this back, right? While this platform extends well beyond Exchange, this is probably the simplest way I can show you. So status page shows you that we've got some stuff backing up, pretty straightforward. I can go ahead and dive into Exchange, select the user who lost the data that I want to recover. We're going to use Joseph Oakes for this particular example. Let's say it was deleted, a month or two ago. We'll just go back about a month. I can either dive into folder structure, or I could just easily search for something like HubSpot. Everyone loves a good local-based company, right? I'll select the piece of data, click restore, push it back to the original user, right? Someone lost their data, we want to get it back to them, although of course we could push it to someone else if we wanted to. One of the nice features of this platform allows you to shift data around as you see fit, but we'll focus just on a standard restore today. Click restore, it's successfully started. I can even see it. Yep. Now we're going to the Exchange environment. For those of you who want to be skeptical, which I totally get, Joseph Oakes, that was the account that I looked at in Backupify a moment ago. We'll go ahead and refresh this page quickly, and you'll see that we have a Backupify restore tab right here, or folder, excuse me. And inside of it will be the content that I just restored down in this super deep folder that I actually restored. That was my error. But essentially what we've done here is we've taken data from a secure second copy and pushed it directly back to O365 in a matter of seconds. And we did it with about 4 clicks, maybe 5, depending upon how you count. All right? So very straightforward. Anything from, I just don't want to deal with Microsoft's native tools, all the way up to something where Microsoft can't help you recover, like certain types of ransomware scenarios and beyond. Our platform will help you recover it. And again, this is for Exchange, for OneDrive, for SharePoint, and for Teams. So the last thing I'll leave you with, because I know some people in the audience have already started to use backup solutions, just some things that make us a little bit different. Assuming it comes back up here, there we go. This is super simple to set up, takes about 15 minutes to run or to configure. That's not an exaggeration, it is ridiculously simple. I should mention that it's completely OAuth 2 token based. We do not ask for your credentials, you never input them into our platform. That's, again, a big differentiator for us. It's all automated, so once you set this thing up, it runs 3 backups a day, you don't have to worry about it. It's our own private cloud, so it is completely separate from Azure. Some people hate that, but most of the people recognize that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, which is a really important item. It's an all-in-one solution. We're bringing you support, storage, licensing, everything, all in one inclusive package, very straightforward and easy to manage. And again, that security component that I mentioned a few moments ago, we are SOC 2 Type 2 audited both on the infrastructure and the application layer, and we have been for 6 or 7 years now, which again just speaks a little bit to the longevity and focus on our security program. So I went through this really quickly. Obviously, we had some technical difficulties. I want to let you guys get to what you actually came here to see tonight. Before I wrap up, does anyone have any quick questions about this? Sure.
3 backups per day.
Yeah.
What happens in between?
Yeah, it's a great question. What you've identified is kind of an issue with any backup that's ever existed, right? You have backup points with on-prem infrastructure, right? You can get down to every 5 minutes or even less, but you still have those different points. We do back up the recycling bins, et cetera, so we do provide some coverage, but theoretically, I think what you're asking is someone gets something or creates a document and deletes it within 30 seconds of doing it. Unfortunately, Microsoft's APIs are throttled to the point where we can't do real-time syncs. I don't know of anyone on the market who does that. That being said, again, in that scenario, you're dealing more with like a litigation scenario. Someone's generally trying to hide something there. That's not where we really focus. We tend to focus on a larger disaster-based event where someone deleted something they've had for a while or ransomware has hit, and that's what will happen. But you're right, in between those backup points, if data is created and lost in that span, it is gone.
And you specify the times, or is it standard?
It's standardized to run approximately 7 to 8 hours apart. It's all done by algorithm to avoid bottlenecking and as well as to handle those throttles more appropriately. I talked with an engineer at Ignite and was like, hey, how do we get around these throttles? And he looked at me dead in the face and went, you don't. So we have to work within those confines, right? And that's why we do it. Yeah, that hurt a little bit in the soul when he said that. Cool, Dimitri.
So you mentioned that you back up teams. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, excellent point. And I will admit, like, that's a little bit of a broad term, right? Ultimately, API access to Teams has kind of blown up recently, but a lot of it's still in beta. A lot of it's still underway at the Microsoft side. So to be very specific in regards to what we cover the content on the Teams site, we cover the calendar events, and we cover the public channel conversations. Private, we're waiting on some API calls to come out of beta. Hopefully that's within the next month or two, but we'll see. One-to-one chats, we're looking at end of Q1, but that could push into Q2 if I'm being realistic. So that's an area of big growth for us right now, but that's what we cover and that's what we're looking to do. Does that answer at least close enough? Cool. Yeah.
Can you bring your own keys with you?
That's a great question. Not today, but it's something we're starting to play with. Ultimately, we actually did bring your own keys back in the day, and we actually had a couple of customers brick their data. As a backup company, that's really bad. It doesn't really work for us to go, that was your fault. They still got pretty mad, right? So we do our own customer management, or excuse me, we do manage the customer keys. Access is incredibly limited to that, which is all outlined in our SOC 2 Type 2, which is one of the reasons I raised that. I think there's like 8 people who have access to them, like our VP of product, VP of engineering, and then like 6 or so. That's, no, it might be 7. So now it's 9. High-end infrastructure engineers. And the only reason they really have access to that is for high-level troubleshooting where they need to view the data set in a raw format. I'm not looking at your emails, but there are certain compliance standards and regulations that won't work for. So that's why I say we're not a fit for everyone, right? But that's how we manage it today.
Do you allow for multiple keys? So if we have different levels of content sensitivity, we can have different keys applied to it?
Interesting. Not today, but I would love to understand that use case a little bit better so I could potentially bring that to my product manager. I can guess why you're doing that. I don't know how we would replicate that on our side due to the fact that, yeah, that would be interesting. I'd have to look into our code base a little bit further to sort of see what we could do there, but I'd love to understand the use case a little bit better, but no, not today.
Yeah, we have different levels of admins.
Right.
Some that have been query checked, some have fingerprinted, some from Department
Mhm.
of Justice.
Mhm.
So we have a layered IT approach,
Cool.
depending on the sensitivity of the data.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's super interesting. And I mean, this is where we start to get into this like hyper regulated world that's a little bit harder to deal with. And I'll, not to sort of speak too generally, I focus on our product. I don't know anyone in this space is really handling that stuff super well yet. I would love to say we'll be the first. We'll see. Don't laugh at me over there.
No,
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. We have regions around the world. We do run our own infrastructure, so regions include US, Canada, UK specifically for post-Brexit, EU, which is based in Germany, and APAC. The region that you select is where all of the data resides. If you're looking at using Microsoft's geosync features, we're looking to add support for that in the future, but today it is a one-to-one relationship. Your one Backupify account exists in one region. No data ever goes across international borders outside of that region.
And the pricing is
Per user.
per user?
Yep, I should have included that, I'm sorry. It's $3 per user per month at list price. Casey in the back is one of our sales representatives. If you're curious about more specific pricing, obviously it's technology. It starts at list price and goes down. Yeah.
So the pricing per user has nothing to do with the size of the actual data in
Correct.
Microsoft?
Yep, it's an
5
unlimited.
petabytes, still you give it $2 per user?
Yep, we have a fair use policy. If you have one user who has 5 petabytes of data and you want us to charge you $3 for it, like, no, we're not going to take that deal as a company.
I'm saying, so you have a limit, so what is that limit per user?
Honestly, it's variable based upon your needs. Like if you have a specific environment where you think that it might be an issue, like talk to us. We'll figure it out for you. We use $3 as a standard mark, but like we are a business, right? Ultimately, we do have to take storage costs into account. That being said, our private cloud is running well over 550 petabytes of data worldwide. We get a pretty good deal on hard drives, so storage is cheap for us. So as a result, like, yeah, we label it as unlimited. Essentially, the way we handle that is we would determine the contract price with you, at which point you have as much as you want.
So basically, it is really depends on the individual customer, how much data they're going to access. That's the
Correct.
basic contract. So
Correct.
it's not the $2 per user. It's whatever, it's being assigned to the individual customer.
That is correct to some degree. I mean, ultimately, usage patterns within O365 are relatively standard. Most people don't have 5 users and 10 petabytes of data. It does happen here and there. Most people we see fall within a very specific range of probably less than 100 terabytes.
I'm surprised.
The edge cases 100% exist. Don't get me wrong. But again, if we have environments that are pushing the limits of what O365 can do, like, yeah, let's have a conversation. But yeah, obviously, then we have to look at it. And again, the reason we do a fair use policy that's not defined like that is we don't want to set a hard limit on you. Like, if there's a good reason for your business to have that much data and there's a good reason for us to work with you, like, absolutely, we want to partner with you on that. I know I'm probably taking too much time, Dimitri. I'm sorry.
We have a question from an online.
Yeah, please.
Naveen asks if you have a government cloud certification.
We do not. I'll make it easy. I wish we did. It's something that we're looking at. Ultimately, the easiest way for us to do that is via Azure. That kind of goes against some of our tenets of ideals of keeping the data completely separate from O365. It's something we're looking into, but not today. Cool. Well, look, I probably took too much time. Again, sorry to the presenters. Thank you guys very much. If you have any questions, me and Casey will be hanging out in the back. Feel free to ask us. And otherwise, enjoy the rest of the presentation. Oh, I can't talk.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. All right. So for our main presentation today, Scott is going to be talking to us about how to use Visio for automating or creating workflows for automation in Power Automate. Microsoft keeps renaming these things, makes it very challenging to say sentences like that.
As a matter of fact, you'll see that half of what I'm going to show you is still labeled flow.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Mine.
We're good.
Okay.
We are good to go. All right, without any further ado, here's Scott.
Thank you. Scott Helmers, by name. I work for a local small consult. I guess I should call us a boutique consulting company. That sounds better than a small consulting company. Harvard Computing Group is the name of the company. My partner Mike Cunningham and I have been working together for the better part of 20 years, primarily doing business process consulting. So we help organizations map processes, either current state processes, help design future state processes. Along the way, after the first 6 or 8 years of consulting, we kind of ran across an issue on a recurring basis where there just wasn't a really good way for our clients to create content-rich process maps. Flowcharts are okay, they're nice pictures, they have a few words on each of the boxes, but that was about as far as that went. So we devised our own way of doing that. We built a Visio add-in called Task Map, and that's not the subject for tonight, but it leads to what I'm about to say, which is why I'm standing here talking about Visio. In the process of designing and developing the add-in for Visio called Task Map, I ended up learning a reasonable amount about Visio, and I got an email one day in 2008 that said, "Congratulations, Scott, you've been named an MVP for Visio." And honestly, I had never heard of the MVP program. I didn't even know what that meant. 12 years later, it's been an annual award for which I'm eternally grateful because it's plugged me into a community of, into the Visio community in ways that I never would have imagined beforehand. So the things I'm going to show you tonight are all about what the Visio product team has been doing in the last couple of years to integrate Visio with other parts of the Office 365 suite. So the main focus is Visio and Flow/Power Automate. But assuming we have time, I want to show you a little bit some of the integration with Excel and PowerPoint and Word. Who knew that Visio was integrated with Word, right? Let alone PowerPoint. So it's all true. The comment or the aside I made earlier when Mike was talking about updates, about there are good updates and not so good updates. About 4 days ago, I happened to be in New York with my daughters over the weekend, and then on the way to Houston, from which I returned at 2 o'clock this morning. And I just was checking something in Visio, and lo and behold, I discovered that there were certain things that didn't work. So I went on the mailing list that we Visio MVPs have with the dev team in India, and I said, "Hey, this is what's up." And they said, "Oh." And 4 days later, unfortunately, the problem still exists. So what I'm about to show you is a video recording, a webcast I did for Microsoft Canada toward the end of last year, demonstrating Visio integrated with Power Automate, because some of what's broken right at this moment in Visio has to do with that integration. So I just ask your forbearance. We'll talk a little bit of, we'll talk before, during, and after. Ask questions even during the video. It's easy to pause, of course, so I'll be happy to jump in and answer any questions you have as we go. A couple of bits of background that are useful to know. The idea for integrating Visio with Power Automate is near and dear to my heart as a business process consultant, because for years, what I've been able to do with my clients is create process maps. And that's a really good thing. There's a lot of value in the map, especially a content-rich map, not just a series of boxes and arrows. What I've not been able to do for the last 20 years with my clients is give them a way to turn that process map into action, to automate. There was no workflow engine behind Visio that we can conveniently plug into. In 2013, Visio and SharePoint Designer, there was some integration that would allow Visio to create a SharePoint workflow diagram that could be exported. David's shaking his head, yes. I don't know if anyone ever used it. You did, you tried? Yeah, okay, all right. So good news. Honestly, though, the broad reception in the market was kind of a and people did not use it extensively, and it's no longer actually supported either on the SharePoint side or the Visio side unless you continue to plug away at it. This integration between Visio and Flow, then.
You've got a message you want to.
Yes, I might want to click. Thank you. This integration between Visio and Power Automate is newer, just within the last year or so. The intent is very much the same as what the SharePoint workflow integration was intended to be. use the tool of choice for drawing flowcharts, Visio, lay out the process steps, and then be able to click a button and have action happen. There is an intermediate step. When I lay out my flow in Visio, my flow chart in Visio, I establish the connections to external data sources, and then I export to Power Automate, and I have to do the final configuration there. That's the intermediate step. So I can't do all the configuration in Visio, but I can do all the parts that the business users care about, lay out the process in a way that the business users understand, and then the tech folks, we can step in and finish doing the plugging and tighten a couple of screws and then make action happen. So that's one key thing to know. The other key thing to know is that the product team chose to implement this integration using the BPMN template in Visio rather than the standard flowchart template. And how many of you are familiar with BPMN? 2 or 3? The business process model and notation, BPMN, is about a 15-year-old standard for mapping processes. The symbols used in BPMN and then the BPMN templates have existed in Visio for several generations of the product. The idea was have something that looks fairly like a conventional flowchart, so you'll see the same rectangles and diamonds and so forth, but there is a degree of specificity that you can add to the data associated with those shapes that, in theory, can help the communication between the business users and the IT folks to be able to execute a process that needs to be automated. BPMN is widely used in some places and widely not used in others. I don't know how to characterize it exactly, but you'll find that many people do like BPMN a lot, and others say, no thanks, it's just too much trouble. For better or for worse, that's where the Visio team started. I think you will find that this capability I'm about to show you will exist with other kinds of flowcharting templates. And by the way, in case you had never sat down and counted, there are actually 15 different templates in Visio Professional that all have something to do with creating flowcharts, whether they're value stream maps or BPMN or audit diagrams. There are actually 15 of them. We're going to talk about one right now, the BPMN. So with that as the background, I will turn to the video and again, ask questions as we go along. I'm happy to pause it and Power Automate. But first I need to remind you a little bit about the different editions of Visio that exist. First, Visio Standard, some of you may have used Visio Standard over the years, is the basic entry point for Visio. It includes dozens of templates and starter diagrams. Visio Professional is the expanded version, more capabilities, more templates, more starter diagrams, and key, at least certainly in my usage with Visio, key in the professional edition of Visio is all of the data handling and data linking, data visualization capabilities that really set Visio apart from most other diagramming software. What we care about today in particular is something called Visio Plan 2. Now, standard and professional are perpetual license products. You pay Microsoft once and end of story. Plan 2 is the subscription model, much like Office 365. Not only are there more templates and more starter diagrams, but what Microsoft is doing is to add new capabilities, many of which appear first, and in some cases will never exist anywhere else besides the subscription version. They are added to Visio Plan 2, and the one we care about today is this feature to export to Power Automate. Just quick pause. It won't come as a surprise to any of you that Microsoft has discovered that they would rather collect money from you every month rather than just once. So that's exactly why all the cool stuff gets added to what is now called Visio Plan 2. Talk about a brilliant product name, right? Let's call it Visio Plan 1 and Visio Plan 2. Visio Plan 2 is the name then. If you go look for the subscription version of Visio, Visio Plan 1, just as a quick aside, allows you to create diagrams in any browser on any device. It works brilliantly well for that. I can take my Android phone or an iPad and create a true Visio diagram. The range of templates is more limited. The range of capabilities, of course, is more limited, but it's 100% browser-based. That's all you need to create a Visio diagram. That's plan one. With plan two, you get that, plus you also get a downloadable version, basically the desktop client version of Visio, but the one that has all these other cool new features that aren't in Visio Professional.
Brand new, released in October 2019. At the moment, it requires the use of BPMN shapes, leverages hundreds of the Automate connectors so we can exchange data and do various cool things, as you'll see in a moment. Where do you find this integration with Power Automate? It's on the Process tab. Now, if you have Visio Standard, you won't see the Process tab. Even if you have Visio Professional and you do see the Process tab, you will not see the Microsoft Flow group that is highlighted in red. You do need Visio Plan 2. And by the way, though I mentioned the product name has changed from Flow to Power Automate, you will still see multiple places where the name Flow appears, as is the case on the Process tab.
And as Mike said, it'll probably change again before they update this to say Power Automate.
So let's go to the demonstrations. Let's see what we can actually do with Power Automate and Visio. Let's begin by locating the Power Automate template in Visio. I'm on the New page. I'm going to select the Templates tab, and within the Flowchart category of templates, we find the Microsoft Flow diagram template. To get started, I'm going to pick this sample diagram and click Create. We're just going to look at it for a moment before we go to a simpler one, but I want to give you an idea of where we're headed. This is an example of a more sophisticated process that has steps identified. You notice if I hover over these Power Automate icons, it says things like we're going to update an item in a SharePoint list, or we're going to send an Outlook email via Office 365 Outlook. More about that coming up. We're going to come back and use this example because it's a pretty good flow that illustrates several points. But first, let's get simple. Back to Visio, to the Templates category page, and once again, choose the Microsoft Flow diagram template. This time I'll choose the blank page and click Create. Now, even this blank page template isn't completely blank, as you can see. Let's zoom in and we see that we've got a start, a task, and an end. Now, my scenario is this. I want to monitor my Twitter feed looking for a particular hashtag. And if I find that hashtag, I want to send an email to a colleague to alert her about the presence of that new tweet. So let's select the first step and just type a description. Watch for Twitter post about Visio. And for action 1, we'll say send email. So pretty basic. So far, that's everything you could have done in the past.
Yes.
But now let's go to the
question.
When you're typing them in, you're not being very specific. You're not specifically using the Power Automate trigger and action wording.
That's correct. At this moment in Visio, the question for those of you outside the room, the question was an observation that I'm not using flow syntax here, triggers and actions and so forth. That's correct, not yet. At this moment, all I'm doing is the same thing you have done with every flowchart you ever created, and that's adding text to a shape. So this is purely descriptive at this moment. So hold that thought, and we'll get to in just a moment, we'll get to the point where we actually connect to and specify more information about the flow itself.
Process tab, click the Export button, and the little icon placeholders appear. And now let's configure these icons. Every flow begins with a trigger, so I've selected this start shape. And if we go over to the export panel, we see a variety of different connectors that we can use. There are lots more than this. We'll see more about that coming up. But for right now, let's just select Twitter because it just happens to be here. Once I select Twitter, then I see certain triggers and actions that I can take. In this case, the trigger that launches this new flow is indeed when a new tweet is posted. So let me select that. Let's go to the task, and that task doesn't involve Twitter. It was Outlook 365. So let's choose that, Office 365 Outlook. And now you'll notice I have 34 different actions I could take. Just notice this, I can send emails, I can respond to events, I can update contacts, create new contacts, get contact information, get rooms, a list of rooms that are available for scheduling a meeting, update events, delete emails, pretty much anything you can do in the Outlook user interface, you can do here via Power Automate. In my case, this is fairly straightforward. I just want to send an email. So I'm going to select that, and you notice the icon changes to an Outlook icon. That's all we need to do here in Visio, except for exporting our flow. So let's refresh the diagram, click the Export button, and in this panel, we can specify a name for our flow. So this is Twitter to Outlook, we'll call it that. If I was not already connected, that is logged into Twitter and to Outlook Office 365, I would see that I would be provided that opportunity right here in the lower part of this pane. But I already am, so let's just click Create Flow. Visio has communicated with Power Automate, saved the flow, and we could manually go there, but here's a very convenient link that says go to Power Automate, so let's click. That takes me to my web browser, and we are now looking at this new flow called Twitter to Outlook. On the right, you'll see the two connections. We are already logged into Office 365 with my email address, and we are connected to Twitter with my Twitter handle @VizProcess. The owner of this particular flow, me, is here. What I need to do now is edit the flow. Basically, there are two steps here. Step one is what we just saw back.
So now we're leaving the territory that I know about, and we're entering territory that a lot of you in this room and online know a whole lot more about than I do, which is flow itself. From here on, for the next moment or two, this will look completely familiar to you because we have left Visio behind. Let it do the work of creating the basic flow, and now we're going to do the final configuration.
In Visio, create the steps in the process. Step two is use flow to configure the specific steps. Here, for example, what is it that we want to search for in Twitter? I don't want everything in my Twitter feed to send a notification to my colleague, but what I do want to look for specifically is the hashtag #Visio. So there's my search text. Now we need to configure the email, and ordinarily I'd want to send this to my colleague Rebecca, but in this particular case what I'm going to do, just for the sake of convenience, is send it to myself because it'll be quicker and we'll see the result more quickly. For the subject, I want to just say new Visio tweet, and in the body of the message I'll say a new Visio tweet arrived from, and this is where it starts to get interesting. Yes, I can type fixed text like that, but notice this column of choices here. These are all dynamic attributes of the incoming tweet that I can use. So I'd like to alert Rebecca to the fact that a new Visio tweet was arrived from a particular person. So I'm going to choose name and then space, and I'll put a left parenthesis. I want to include the Twitter handle as well, which is down here under the name, username. So it's the screen name of the user, and I'll close paren there. Carriage return, and I want to actually include the body of the tweet. So here's an entry for tweet text, so I'll add that, and then I'll say, regards, Scott. Let's click save. If there were any errors at that point, there's a flow checker button here that would tell me what the specifics are, but we don't have any errors. So now what I'd like to do is test this flow. To do that, I click Test, and Flow offers me the option to either use data from a previous run. So if I've previously tested, I could actually reuse that data. That's not an option in this particular case because I haven't done this before. So I'll choose that I will perform the trigger action and go from there. So now let's click Test. Let's go to Twitter, click Tweet, paste some text here, click Tweet. Notice I did use #Visio in that tweet. It says your flow ran successfully. Well, let's see whether we actually got an email. Here in my Outlook inbox, we see a new Visio tweet. It says a new Visio tweet arrived from Scott Helmers' Viz process to view, and it was the text that I pasted in. To view any of the tips and tricks webcast, use this link that is at the end of the tweet. You'll also notice that I captured several other tweets that use the #Visio hashtag. So they happen to come from various places around the world, but this flow is clearly operating in the background. If we went back and posted another tweet, we would see it arrive here in my inbox as well. As I pointed out, I wouldn't normally notify myself about a new tweet, but in this particular case, it was just convenient. My goal for the next demonstration is to send a notification to my phone. Now you see a picture of my phone sitting here. I actually have a better way to display the contents of the phone that you'll see in a couple of minutes, but this is where we're headed with this particular demo. Here's the process that we're going to use to notify me about a new customer. We're going to start, the trigger event will be to watch for a new customer email. When that any email arrives, we'll look for specific notification or information to suggest that this is a new customer email. If it is, we'll update the database, send the notification to my phone, and then be done. So let's configure this. Go to the Process tab, click Export to open the Flow panel, and
as an aside, I find it counterintuitive that the first thing I need to do is click a button that says export. That just doesn't work for me, but that is what you need to do. Process tab, click the button that says export in order to start.
And let's start with the trigger event. In this case, we're going to look at my Office 365 Outlook. The trigger event in particular is when a new email arrives. The gateway event is the one that we need to configure to indicate which is the yes path and which is the no path. So in this case, it's very simple because the no path is no and the yes path is yes. The reason for this choice is that you might use words like accepted, rejected, or approved, disapproved, things like that, rather than just yes and no. I happen to have used, as you can see, I happen to have used yes and no on my connectors between the tasks. Next, for the database, let's look at some of the choices here. I'm going to go to the full list of connectors. I mentioned earlier that there were hundreds of connectors available. Everything that Power Automate can do is available to you here in Visio. So you notice a bunch of Microsoft related things toward the top here. Scroll down, we'll see SQL databases, Power BI, Azure AD. We can add and remove groups, configure people, all kinds of things. Bitly, Bing Search, Chainpoint, many of these things, I don't even have a clue what they are, but they're web services or apps. The thing I'm looking for, if we go down to the S's, is Salesforce. So what I'd like to be able to do is create a new record, or there may be other things I want to do, but in this particular case, create a new record. So let's choose that. The Salesforce logo appears up here in the upper left. And then finally, I want to notify of a new customer. Go back to see all of the connectors. And one of the ones that's available toward the top of the list here is called notifications. So let's choose that and see what actions I have. The choices are to send an email or to send a mobile notification. In this case, I received an email it's been determined to be of a type I'm interested in. So I want to notify Flow on my phone. So let's do that. Send a mobile notification, and we're all set. Now, for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm not actually going to send an update to Salesforce, so I'm going to delete this step from here. Let's refresh the diagram and export the flow. Notice that the export to flow button doesn't light up. This is a little bit subtle, but down toward the bottom here is a section that says resolve issues, tiny little yellow triangle over here on the right, and here are the issues. In this particular case, one or more shapes, and clicking on the issue highlights the shape in question, shape or shapes. It's a punctuation issue. Flow is pretty specific. There are certain control characters that I cannot use in my descriptions, and in this case, it's the question mark. So let's go over here, edit, and remove the question mark, and try again. Refresh, no issues. Now we can export to flow. Click Create Flow, and we're done. So let's go to Power Automate. Edit the flow. And here are the steps. First thing is watch for new customer email. I've already said I want to use Office 365 Outlook, so Flow is connected to it, and it shows me all of my folders. I'm going to choose Inbox, so I'm going to monitor the inbox for a new email. Pretty straightforward. How do I know whether this email applies to a new customer? Well, when I click New Customer, the flow expands to show the yes path and the no path. On the no path, by the way, just as back in the Visio diagram, there are no actions required on that no path. But on the yes path, we want to take action. But in order to do that, we need to set a condition first. So under what conditions will we determine that this is a valid new customer email? Let's scroll down to the bottom where we find the subject. Simply monitoring the inbox was enough to know that the email will have a subject as well as these other properties. We're going to say subject contains, and let's type new customer. Now, in playing with this a bit, I've found that this appears to be case sensitive. So let's put new customer, and let's make that singular.
Is that generally true with Flow? Is it the conditions case sensitive?
N, because that's what we'll use in our test email. Next, we need to indicate what we want to notify. What notification should I receive? And I'll say something like new customer email from space, and now I want to indicate from whom the message came. No big surprise. Scroll down through our dynamic content, and here is from the mailbox owner and sender of the message. So it's going to be a very simple notification, just the text new customer email from, and then an indication of from whom the email arrived. If I wanted to include links, a link in the notification, I could do that. For the sake of simplicity, I'll leave it blank. We have no issues on the flow checker. So let's test this email. I'm going to click Test. I'll perform the trigger action and click Save and Test. And so the flow is now running. Let's switch over to another machine. So here I am on a computer logged in as Rebecca Laszlo, my colleague. So this is her Outlook.com email box. I've previously typed a message, new customer, ABC Consulting. Scott, I've just closed a deal for TaskMap with his business process mapping firm, ABC Consulting, blah, blah, blah. Let's send the message. Let's close this virtual machine and go back to our flow. My flow ran successfully. Let's do two things now. Let's go to Outlook to see whether I received the email. And sure enough, here's the email from Rebecca, but I'm not monitoring my email at the moment. I actually wanted a notification to be sent to my phone. So let's take a look at my phone. I'm using software, by the way, called A-Power Mirror from a company called A-PowerSoft. That's all one word, apowersoft.com. This is the software that allows me to share the screen on my phone. So every action I take on my phone, I'm now holding my phone in my left hand, though I know you can't see that. You can't see the results. Let's tap the flow icon, and we will wait for it to refresh. There it is. We have a Twitter to Outlook flow that's run successfully several times, and Twitter to email that also has run. Let's refresh. While we're waiting for the notification, if I touch Twitter to Outlook, which says it ran successfully 6 times and was last run an hour ago, now we can actually see the steps in the flow, and this is the one we used earlier that notified us, or notified me by email, that a Twitter post had arrived that had the Visio, #Visio hashtag in it. So we get all of that information here as well. Now we've received the notification, so you can see that for this flow, the flow ran successfully once. There was a new customer email from Rebecca Laszlo. And if I touch it, we see that the full notification is here, including exactly what I asked for, not only the fixed text, new customer email from, but also the email address of the sender.
All right, let me stop it there. Questions? Does this seem useful? That's my question to you, but go ahead, you have a question.
Is once you export to Visio, are they synced or they're gone forever, as they're separated forever?
I will, thank you, good question. Is the Visio diagram and the flow, are they synced with each other in perpetuity, or is it a one-shot deal? I will stand here before you and repeat the official answer from Microsoft, which is, at present, they're unconnected. So if I were to change the Visio diagram, I would create a new flow. I would need to export and create a new flow from that. So right now, that the official words at Ignite were check with us again in the near term. So I don't have any dates in mind. I don't know what they have in mind, but right now they are not synchronized.
And I can't remember, but when you pressed create the flow and then it gave you the link to Power Automate.
Yes.
You could get that link back from the Visio, or what if you change the name of it or something? That doesn't change then again.
Actually, a good question. I clicked on the link to go see my flow. How would I get back to that another time? Answer is this: if I go to another tab in the browser here. So this is my Power Automate screen, and here are the workflows that I've created. So they are what I've created by starting from Visio is no different than if you went here and created a new flow directly on the Power Automate screen. So these were all examples of ones that I have created at various times, starting with Visio in my particular case.
So the value you see in the Visio first versus creating this in Power Automate is collaboration on that process?
I think so, yes. In fact, that was the question I was going to ask you. How does this provide value to you potentially? I see some heads vigorously shaking yes, a couple of maybes. Where do you see it?
To me, I think the big value here is it's something that I can use the Visio component to work with the stakeholders of the project, and it's a much more visual and easier to understand thing to them than digging into a flow to look at a process.
I agree entirely. Was that a similar
Yeah, I'm
opinion?
on the team I'm on, we're kind of the business process analyst team, and so that's really the world we all live in, and
Yeah.
I'm just the SharePoint Office 365 person, and I've really gone through a painful experience trying to do the SharePoint design in 2013 with the Visio diagrams, and it does not translate very nicely.
Yeah.
So having this, to be able to say, like, let's take our future state process map and now we can plug it into a workflow is really exciting.
Yeah, well, good. I agree with both of you completely, and because I find that when I'm sitting down with the business users, putting this on the screen just kind of isolates over, you know, they just aren't accustomed to dealing at this level of detail. But a flowchart, you know, they may hate them, but they know what they are and they can understand them. And so that's the conversation I want to have, is based around the flowchart, and then we'll worry about how to configure the specifics in another room.
Got a question for you.
Yes.
Do you see the export actually working so that they can actually export to flows owned by a team? Because right now, what I can see immediately is a minefield just waiting to be danced in.
Okay.
Because of the fact of the matter is, somebody's going to be a Visio expert. They're going to make a whole bunch of flow. They're going to win the lottery. They're going to become a towel boy in Tahiti. And as soon as their accountant's gone, all the flows stop working. And because they used Visio to design and make them use the export feature, which is phenomenal, but it goes to my flow and not to a team flow.
Yeah, it's a great question. Because all the flows that I create in Visio go to my account, my flow account, what happens when I'm gone or get hit by the proverbial bus, which is the negative consequence of winning the lottery. I mean, the negative flip side of winning the lottery. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that right now. I know that conversation came up in the booth at Ignite when we were showing this to hundreds of people a day. I don't know what the answer is. So again, I would say stay tuned. I know that's a real need, and I know that the Visio team knows that's a real need.
Anything we do in production, we just share with a service account.
Anything you do in production, you share with a service account? Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, once you export it out, then you can just share it into the team.
Okay. So there's no way to share it directly into the team. I don't think.
I can't remember the process right now, but there is a way to relatively easily move things from a personal account into a team.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. So it may be, David, that there's a better near-term solution already, or a reasonable solution already, if it's reasonably easy to move things from personal account.
I forget what it is, but I just did a quick internet search on it and I found a process for doing that, and it worked very easily.
Okay.
It's easy enough to move to, but the thing is, let's just say end users, when your teaching model is, there's a thing, go find it. Yeah, they'll hold your breath on them actually.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to jump, not to my Outlook email, thank you very much. I'm going to jump into Visio and I'm going to show you two things. I'm going to show you what's wrong at the moment, and then I'll show you a sample of what you should see. When you want to start a new Visio diagram that you want to export to Flow, you can start in either of two places. There is a Visio to Flow template, and there's also the BPMN template, and either one is an acceptable beginning place. So you can start directly with the BPMN if you want to, or use what I'm about to show you here. Now, normally what you should be able to do, if you're on the Visio new page, you should be able to click the template tab and go into the flowchart category, and you should see a bunch of actual thumbnails here rather than these flaky things that appeared 4 days ago. So here is BPMN diagram. That should be a thumbnail of a BPMN diagram. If you scroll down, there's the Microsoft flow diagram, and if I click on that, and when I clicked on that in the video that you saw, there was not only the little blank diagram in the upper left, there were 3 sample diagrams. Those starter diagrams, by the way, were introduced 2 versions of Visio ago, and they don't exist for every template in Visio, but they exist for a lot of them. And they're really kind of nice. The idea of the starter diagrams is some people are perfectly comfortable starting with a blank page. Some people are perfectly terrified by a blank page. And so why not at least have a few shapes on the page as a starting point, as suggestions? So yeah, you don't see those here. Now I'll show you what it actually looks like. This is the smoke and mirrors part. I've managed to trick it earlier today into giving you this view. This is what you should see when you go templates, flowchart, and select the flow template. You click once and you will see this just as you saw in the video a moment ago. These 3 sample diagrams are actually pre-configured with connectors to Outlook and a variety of other things. So if you want to just try it out, you don't even have to start from that simple blank page. You can go use any one of these 3 sample diagrams, and it's actually pretty cool. This one is a purchase order process. Kind of nice. I have it on the video. I'm not going to take the time to show it to you now. But it's a great way to get started with looking at what you do inside Visio to lead to executable flows. 8 o'clock, is that the approximate ending time?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay. I've got a couple other things, as I mentioned, other integrations I'll show you briefly. Any other questions before I move on about Power Automate?
So how complex can the flowcharts be? And if you have to use the business
BPMN, yeah.
modeling, are you restricted to using those how you would do business process modeling? And then recovery. If there's a hiccup in the workflow, restarts and stuff, how do you do that? Are there latency issues?
Okay, let me tackle them one at a time. Yeah.
But I want you to cover everything, but those are the things that I have.
Yeah, let me start from the end and come back to the first question. Anything to do with hiccups in the flow, error processing, recovery, that's 100% Power Automate. By then you're long out of Visio territory. So personally, I can't answer that, but that's no different than what it is today. If you think about what this Visio capability provides, it's really just a different front end. It gets you to the point of having a flow sketched out in a way that business users generally can understand, as we've all said. It affects nothing on the execution side of it. Okay. As far as, and I may have missed 1 or 2 of your questions here, so catch me if I don't. As far as the BPMN is concerned, let me see whether I can finesse this into showing us what BPMN actually looks like. Yeah, here we go. I'm playing a game with it here to see if it works. No, it didn't. Okay. So BPMN, if I create the diagram, the BPMN shapes they're based on the flowchart shapes. So I can put a start event on the page. I can use the auto connect capabilities that are part of Visio to add some shapes every once in a while, and any Visio user ever knows that lines don't always behave the way you want them to. I have a whole separate discussion about that for another time. I'm happy to tell you about that. There are ways to make them behave better, but sometimes like this, they just go where they want to go. In any event, so a BPMN shape is a flowchart shape. You can type on it, you can do other things. BPMN shapes also have right-click menu options. So if this particular task shape represents a loop, you'll see that there's a standard way in BPMN that loops are notated, or that, for example, a task might be a service task, so it has a special little icon that appears in the upper left. This is Visio's implementation of the BPMN standard. If this is a manual task, there's a little hand that appears and so forth. So it's those adornments to the shapes that are the visible manifestation of how BPMN is different from just a standard flowchart. You could use it without turning any of those little icons on, and it will look very much like a conventional flowchart. So business users who are accustomed to flowcharts really shouldn't have much trouble with it. Yes?
I forgot when you were showing before, if you were in Visio and you got over to the Power Automate triggers.
Yes.
It would allow you to take one from there and pop it in, even if you didn't have a shape for it yet.
Well, let me back up. So I would go to the process tabs. Now that I have a BPMN diagram, I started from the BPMN template. I would go to the process tab, click export, and that opens the pane in which I can specify the triggers and actions. So I'm with you so far. What was the rest?
Now you're saying, oh God, I need another trigger. I'm gonna
okay.
From there and plop it over here.
Yep. So I can Yep, I can drag a task from the stencil. I can drop it in here, and Visio will actually make room and fit it in. Once again, the lines may or may not behave the way you want, exactly the way you want them to. So here's this new step.
But I have to have the shape before I can grab the.
That's correct. You can't configure a trigger or an action without having a shape on the page, a process step on the page. Yes, that's correct.
How complex can it be?
Oh, yes, you did ask that. How complex? There's no limit. There's no shape count limit or anything else that I'm aware of. So if your process spans 100 shapes or 100 steps or.
So for example, in your experience, can you handle, say, the purchasing, right? Purchase order creation to payment, the entire process? Will it handle it?
I can't give you a good answer to that. So I think the prospect is reasonable, but it might also be that for me as a process consultant, I might not recommend you put all that in one diagram anyway. That's something that we would want to work out, whether we have one high-level overview of the process and then detailed sub-processes for different major elements within the purchase order process. That's a whole separate conversation, nothing to do with the underlying technology.
Right, but if you want to create a flow, you cannot have several diagrams?
You cannot have multiple diagrams feed one flow. That's a very good point. Yes,
That's why you have to kind of plan it all.
So yes, if you want to have one massive flow, then it's going to be one massive Visio diagram that you use to create it. Now, you can link flows together. So if I have 3 parts of the process diagrammed separately, I can create 3 separate flows, and one flow can trigger another. So there are ways to work with it.
So the design implemented consideration, because the governance, like everybody was concerned about, right?
Yeah.
Where is it going to be stored? Is it a personal account? And then change control.
Right.
I mean, it just blows up.
Yes, that's all very true. Yeah, and this technology does not change any of those governance issues, I think. Mike?
Is there any way to go the other direction? Because it occurs to me as you were talking about this and using it as a visual aid, this would actually be a wonderful way if you could export a flow.
Back into Visio. That's
the great way to document all of the stuff that we've done in Flow.
Yeah, it's a brilliant idea, and the answer to that question is the same as I gave a moment ago. Not yet.
Okay.
But it's high on the list, I know, for the Visio team, because that's a brilliant use case. Right. Is I've got this this library full of 482 flows that I've created, and I can't really talk to my business users about them easily. Right. So, geez, wouldn't it be nice if I could create a Visio diagram?
Yeah, it'd be a great way to demonstrate and discuss what is otherwise intangible.
Yeah.
For those of us that are referred to by our companies as the magicians, and we don't understand what they do, but
right.
They make the stuff go.
Now, with that as the segue, let me ask your indulgence, and I will switch to a slightly different topic. We can come back here if there are any more questions, but wouldn't it be nice if you could define a process by putting a bunch of data in Excel and have Visio build a diagram for you from that data in Excel? For example, what if I were to launch Visio and choose a template that is called Basic Flowchart Data Visualizer, choose Create, and when I choose that particular template, a wizard pops up that says, Scott, what would you like to create, a flowchart or a cross-functional flowchart, aka swim lane diagram? Let's go with a flowchart this time around. I'll choose Browse, and for the first time through this, I'm not going to show you how it's done, I'm just going to show you the magic. I selected a file, an Excel file, which I'll show you in just a moment, but let's see the results first. Actually, while it's getting tables, I'll show you. Here's an Excel file. Each row is a step in a process. I'll come back to this to explain it in more detail. I've just connected Visio to that Excel data, and I'm going to click the Finish button, and in a matter of seconds, I have a flowchart.
When did they add this part in?
Late 2018. This part is not brand new, it's relatively new. This again is part of Plan 2. If you have Visio Professional, you're out of luck. You have to do the subscription version, Plan 2. So what does this data look like? This is a pre-formatted Excel workbook that is part of both Visio and Flow. You can get Visio and Excel. If you go into Excel, for example, if you say File, New, and you search for workflow, okay.
I think it was one of the, yeah, it was that second title at the top.
Yeah, it is here. It's not normally there. It's there because I searched for it earlier this evening and just before I came here, and I was, oh, I know, I guess maybe what I searched for was flowchart. So let's try that. Yeah, there we go. So if you search for flowchart, you will get these two templates, one for flowcharts, one for cross-functional flowcharts. So you can do that within Excel. If you start from within Visio, there's a link to click there that will open the Excel diagram as well. And this is what it looks like if I just show you the blank one. I love the way this was built. It's really very nice in that it tells you what this capability is all about. It's called Data Visualizer. Three main steps. You add your process data into Excel, you export to Visio, and you get your diagram automatically. There's another tab that even shows you a sample set of data and what the flowchart will look like as a result. And then you have a tab on which you just fill in your data. And this is simple exercise. It's just a table in Excel. So if you need more rows, you add more rows, fill in your data. That's where I started for this particular example. So the key requirements, a unique ID, alphanumeric, a description for the step in the process, and then you need to tell Visio what's after each step, right? What's next? So step 100 is followed by step 110. In the case of a decision, here's a hiring process. Did the candidate accept our job offer or not? In this case, I have two outcomes, step 180 and step 150, and those correspond to the arrows that will be labeled with whatever text I put here, in this case, yes and no. And then the other key is this drop-down from which I select which flowchart symbol I want to use to represent this row of data. So it's really pretty easy. The green headings I made those green, or Microsoft made those green in the template because those are all optional. That's just any other data I want to happen to want to include when I have my flowchart created for me. And to prove that that really worked, if I select one of these shapes at random and open the shape data window, you'll see that there's a bunch of data inside this shape. So each of these flowchart shapes has whatever data I want to have in there stored right in the shape. And oh, by the way, that leads to all kinds of interesting possibilities, like taking advantage of visualizations, the visualization capabilities in Visio, not a subject for tonight other than to show you an example. So here's an organization chart linked to my HR database, and I'm tracking employee performance and some other things using graphics. This is 100% created in Visio, not even Power BI, although Visio is linked to Power BI too. But this is 100% Visio, stored on SharePoint or in OneDrive for Business, any browser, any device. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, I opened the same diagram on my phone earlier. Yeah, sure enough, there's the same org chart, so I can zoom in and look at it on my phone, my iPad, whatever the case might be. The same idea.
I'm sorry, what was the data source for this?
In this particular case, this was an org chart linked to an HR database. Visio can connect to pretty much any data anywhere. That org chart is sort of an aside from where we were talking about flowcharts, but that's just an example of once I have data inside a shape, I can do a variety of visualizations with that data. Just to carry this one step further, or onto one more idea, this happens to be a flowchart. I also have some data for a swim lane diagram. So it looks like this. It's essentially the same pre-formatted Excel workbook with two exceptions. There are two additional things you need to specify in order to build a swim lane diagram. Specifically, you need to name the lanes. So this column, column G, is called function. Those are the labels that will be on the swim lanes in this future swim lane diagram. And then if you picture the functions going across the swim lanes that go across the page, you can also have vertical phases in a cross-functional flowchart. Not everyone does, but you can. I'm leaving these blank for the moment. We'll create one without to start with. So let's just build a quick cross-functional flowchart. Start the same way, file new, and in this case we have no thumbnail, but we have a cross-functional flowchart data visualizer template. Click create. Once again, just point it at the data. 120. And Visio, has actually opened the Excel workbook and is looking for any tables that exist. In this case, it will find, I believe, exactly one because it's the only one that's in there, but it's the right one. That's good. I won't take a lot of time with this, but you have a fair amount of flexibility. Last time I just clicked finish and had the diagram created with all the defaults. You can be quite specific in terms of telling Visio how this flowchart, or in this case, the swim lane diagram, should look. Which columns represent the names of the functions and the phases, which columns of data represent the descriptions that will be on the tasks and on the arrows between tasks. You can actually map or remap the shapes. This allows me a very nice capability, for example, for my task map add-in for Visio. We don't use the standard flowchart shapes, we use our own shapes. So I can just remap my shapes here inside the wizard. Microsoft knows nothing about my task map product. Well, they do a little bit, but not built into Visio. But it makes it really easy for me just to remap, drag and drop, and I'm done. And I can use this capability to build my own task maps. Some more final stuff, and then click finish. And same idea exactly. Close these couple of extra windows we don't need at the moment. And sure enough, we have a cross-functional flowchart. Now, let me preempt a question, and that is the data are the data and the diagram synchronized with each other? And in this case, the answer is yes, gloriously so. I can change the data, click refresh, and the diagram updates automatically. I can change the diagram. I can actually move shapes around, move them from one lane to another, add new shapes, delete shapes. Click the button, and the data in Excel is updated. So this makes me happy. This is one of those cases where the synchronization you want is already there. Just to wrap up, there is a capability on the View tab in Visio, again in Visio Plan 2 only, a capability on the View tab over here on the left that says Slide Snippets. And sure enough, if I click that button, a pane opens over here on the right. Oh, that would, yeah, let me make it a little bit bigger. If I click the Add button, this little blue highlight zone appears. And if I'd like to focus attention on, let's say, this part of the process in a PowerPoint presentation I want to create, I just highlight as much of the page as I want. I click Export. And there isn't a single copy and paste action required. I now have a slide created for me that has that portion of the, whoops, it didn't seem to get the right portion, did it? Well, maybe that happened this week too.
Does it synchronize?
No synchronization here. This is an export, okay? Yeah, so the little picture of the snippet here has the 4 shapes I selected over on the right pane, but yeah, export. I'm gonna have to go home and report that, I guess.
Question, can you start with this diagram and have it make the Excel file for you?
Not quite as conveniently as you'd hope. It's a good question. So let's say I have an existing flowchart or an existing swim lane diagram. Can I click an export button and have that data put into the properly formatted Excel workbook? And the answer is no, not directly. With any Visio diagram, the report writer capability is actually reasonable for exporting data. So if I go to the Review tab and click Shape Reports, there are built-in reports for many templates, including flowcharts. So if I click that flowchart template, click Run, I can export to Excel, click OK. And there was also an HTML option, you notice, that creates an instant web page with the same report in it, just a table with all of your data. For some reason, this one's taking a little bit longer than normal, but there we go. So in this case, I can easily export all my data. I would probably need to do a little, little work on it to put it back into that Excel format. It's not a one button click, but you can get there.
But I can start with a basic Excel file, either add the data in Excel or add the data in Visio and it'll update.
Yeah, if you start with the pre-formatted template and you use the Visio link, then they are synchronized from there. From what you do from there will be synchronized. Yeah. I won't bother with Save As Word, but other than to show you that it does exist. If you click File, Export in Visio Plan 2 and go to the export page, you see Export Word Document. It will actually analyze, it's principally organized for flowcharts, for process maps, and it will do its best to try to guess where the logical breakpoints are in your process and put segments of the process map onto each page in the Visio document, or in the Word document. It's okay. It's a work in progress, I think. I would describe it that way. Worth experimenting with a little bit now, and if you have ideas or suggestions, I do have some business cards with me, and I do have, I'll just put that up on the screen here too. I'm happy to pass your feedback along. Let me get it here. There we go. Scott at Visio Step by Step visio.com or Twitter @VisProcess. I'm more than happy to pass your feedback along. One of the nice things about being a Visio MVP is there are only 9 of us in the world. So we have a pretty good relationship with the Visio product team. It's kind of nice. So it's daily emails on the distribution list between the 9 of us. I'm the only one in North America at the moment. Then between the 9 of us in the world and the Visio dev team. So it's a pretty unique and wonderful thing. So I love passing suggestions along. Happy to do that. Even bug reports. If you should go through your normal channels for bug reports. I don't want to have you circumvent your service agreements and all of that. But on the other hand, if there's something that's really bothering you that you wonder about, let me know. I'll see what I can find out. Yes.
How many people in the Visio dev team?
How many people on the Visio dev team? I don't actually know. We deal, as you might expect, we deal with the PMs, the program managers, and then not as often the individual developers. I'm trying to think. When we the MVPs were invited to Hyderabad. Visio is unique among Microsoft Office products in that 100% of Visio is developed in the development center in Hyderabad, India. Parts of many other Office products are developed there, but Visio's was the only one, may still be the only one where 100% of it is done there. So they invited us MVPs to Hyderabad. We went in both 2013 and 2015. And in 2015, 60, 70 people at the time, but that may bear no relationship to what the size of the team is now. I really don't know. What's nice is it's a great active team. They've invested very heavily in these integrations. I didn't even mention Teams. There's a whole new set of integrations with Teams so that you can actually do you can work collaboratively, I can say that, collaboratively on Visio documents in Teams. There's multi-threaded commenting that's available. That's true even without Teams, but also works in Teams. So they've been working really hard with the other Office product groups to make these integrations that you've seen, some of which you've seen tonight.
Multi-threaded commenting with the team chat on the side?
Right in the diagram. Yeah. In fact, it works this way. Just quick aside, even without Teams. Oops. If I go to this diagram, for example, and let's just zoom in. Notice the pan and zoom window. So if I want to, focus attention on a particular part of the diagram, I can just draw a little box here and say, oops, that's what I want to zoom in on. So let's take this guy, for example, and I click on the comment pane to open the comment pane. Click New Comment, and guy's still in charge. Whatever my comment is. Now, in this particular case, I happen to know that guy's not still in charge, or at least not on Earth, because that's my dad. And but in any event, that comment, when I click Post here, is added to the Visio diagram. The only requirement is the Visio diagram be stored in SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business. Anybody with any web browser can do the same thing.
Okay, so when you're done, you can purge all that out?
Yes, those comments can always be deleted. So yeah, there's the delete button right here. Little comment balloon appears here. That same thing, if I open this diagram in Visio itself, the same comment balloon appears, and I can add my threaded comments to the conversation. But yes, they can be purged.
But they're all inside the Visio.
They are inside the Visio diagram. Any other questions?
Just have a quick use case for you that might be relevant to a lot of people in the room.
Okay.
One of my favorite things to do with Visio is you can connect it to Active Directory.
Yes.
As a source for an org chart. And I've actually used this a couple of times to actually be an org chart, but frequently to demonstrate to the administrators of Active Directory that their managed by field is not actually up to date or accurate, which as people here who create a lot of flows, understand that that managed by field is very important in SharePoint and Flow.
Good idea. I like that.
So
Yeah, the org chart wizard in Visio it's been around forever, 20 years.
Yeah.
And it has the ability to build org charts automatically from data in Excel, in Access, in Active Directory. So you just point the wizard at your data source and it builds the org chart for you. I will tell you the org chart wizard is 20 years old and parts of it reflect that, absolutely. There are some capabilities that just boggle the mind, things that you should be able to do but can't. But in terms of what it does basically, pointed at data, it will build the diagram for you, the org chart for you. It does that nicely. And I like that use case. That's a good example of a way to visually let people know that there are data issues. Yeah.
You can also point it at a specific person, like a head of a department, and say start here, and it'll do an org chart just for one department.
Yes.
And I embed those on intranet sites all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Great. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time. And thanks for putting up with video me in addition to real me.